Hi guys, my name's Barry and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing a spoiler review for The Flash. So if you haven't seen the movie and you don't want any spoilers guys, then please don't watch this review. If you've seen it already or if you don't mind spoilers, then continue watching. Firstly, as I started watching the film, I just realised that the character's name is Barry Allen. My name is Barry and he works in criminal forensics. I work in criminal forensics. I could be the Flash. This movie is essentially an origin story without being an actual origin story. What I mean by that is we've already got an established Flash character. We know who the Flash is. We know what his backstory is. But in this one, it's almost like it's telling us an origin story without throwing it in our face. Yes, I know that the story of this is from the Flashpoint paradox. So there already is a story in existence and this is it. It's just a movie version of it, but some people will obviously won't know that. But it's a refreshing change to an origin story because it allows us to go back in time with Barry without us seeing the actual full origin story. It gives us the basics, it gives us the important parts, and that's it. As expected, we don't get a lot of Batfleck. We hardly ever see him, and in fact we only really see him at the beginning of the movie as Batman and then a little scene after that, and that's Ben Affleck done. I think it was a great last hurrah for Ben Affleck, and I also think that with the small time we saw him on screen, he was probably at his best as Batman in all of the films that he's been Batman. I don't know what it is, I just think there's something about his voice in this one, the way he acted. It's almost like he's acting like this is my last stint as Batman, and by God, he was absolutely amazing the time on screen. And obviously, me being from Glasgow, I love the scenes with Batman in it because every scene he was in Glasgow. We also get a tiny scene with Wonder Woman. She's obviously just there just to be there, but her scene was really pointless. Now, there is time travel in this film, and I think the discovery of the time travel was very weak, to be honest. But I can understand why they gave us it the way they did, because if they tried to show us him trying to figure out time travel instead of just stumbling upon it, then the movie would be very long and probably boring. So I'm kind of glad, even though the time travel discovery was weak, I'm kind of glad that they did do it like that because I wanted to get to the good parts. Something that was also good was by figuring out time travel so fast, he already had it on his mind that he was going to save his mum, and who wouldn't want to save their mum if she was murdered back in the day? And that's what this story is about, trying to save his mum and also try to undo the things that he's done, because by doing that, by saving his mum, he caused a ripple in the whole entire multiverse. The good thing about saving his mum is he didn't get to see who it was that murdered his mum, even though that's probably one of the things I want to see. But what he done was stop the events of her being in the house herself, which would then entail whoever tries to get into the house probably wouldn't want to do that if the whole family was there. And she forgot the tomatoes at the store, so she sent her husband to go and get the tomatoes, which left her alone and vulnerable. But what Barry done was put the tomatoes into the basket so that she ultimately didn't forget them, which means her husband wouldn't have gone to the shop to get them. That means the intruder wouldn't go into the house. It's a very simple way of doing it rather than trying to stop the attacker. When I look back on the trailers for The Flash, it really does tell us everything that happens in the movie. With besides the cameos that we get near the end, which I'll talk about, the trailers are really beat for beat the whole entire film condensed into 2.5 minutes or so, and it even structures the trailers in the way that the movie's ultimately structured as well. So as much as I loved the trailers when I watched them, looking back on them, I thought that was terrible. After saving his mum, when he was in this, what I'm going to call the time travel arena, I'm sure there's a name for it, while he was in there, he was pushed out of that place by an unknown figure, and it pushed him out into what he thought was just back to normal. But not only was it not his own universe, not his own multiverse, he was pushed into a different multiverse at a different time, back in 2013 when the original Barry was just 18 years old. What I found really interesting is when he found the 18-year-old Barry, he assumed that he was going to become the Flash. But in this multiverse, there are no superheroes. The only superhero is Batman. And maybe a lot of people didn't pick up on this, but the Barry that we get in this film, the 18-year-old Barry, was never meant to be the Flash. The only reason he became the Flash is because our Barry from 2023 took him to the exact location where he became the Flash, which ultimately led to the 2013 Barry becoming the Flash accidentally when he shouldn't have been, which then caused more ripples in this particular world. And it also took the powers from our Barry, and now he's no longer the Flash. I loved how they introduced all these ideas because it did feel like Back to the Future, which is the greatest movie of all time, and they talk about Back to the Future in this, and they also mention Eric Stoltz, who was originally Marty McFly. They also mention him being Marty McFly, and Michael J. Fox never was Marty McFly. The good thing about this world is, with the only superhero being Batman, he also retires because there's no more crime in Gotham City. There's hardly any crime out there, so he doesn't need to be there. So Batman in this universe, or in this multiverse, he's more of a recluse because he's got nothing to do anymore. Because it is 2013, this is when General Zod comes down to take over the world, and this Barry needs to stop him, but because there are no superheroes, he needs to get his newfound 18-year-old Barry to become a superhero, as well as trying to convince this Bruce Wayne to become Batman one more time. Our Barry still believes that Kal-El is here and still hiding. He's just not came out yet, so he tries to get Batman and 18-year-old Barry to help him find Kal-El, and Batman does find the location of an alien being, but when they get there, it's not Kal-El, it's Kara, Kal-El's cousin. She decides that she's going to help them fight Zod because they helped her escape, and when she comes face to face with Zod, she asks him what happened to Kal-El. He said he found Kal-El as an infant, but he didn't make it, so he basically killed young Kal-El. And in this scene, it's quite an intense scene because Kara and Batman, Bruce Wayne, they fight General Zod, they fight everyone around there, but they end up dying. But Barry, or both Barrys I should say, have the idea of just going back in time a little bit to redo that fight scene again. But we soon realise that there is no getting out of this one. Our Barry realises that no matter how many times they go back and try and change it, Batman and Kara are going to die and this world is going to end. But 18-year-old Barry, being as young as he is and influential as he is, he doesn't think that's the only resort. So he goes back time and time again to try and do it. Whereas our Barry's like, you need to stop this. But we quickly realise that the person inside this paradox that pushed our Barry out, we find out very quickly that that is the 18-year-old Barry, and he's gone for years and years trying to figure out a way to stop this. If only we had a Doctor Strange to do it, but he couldn't do it. And he became this sort of bad Zoom-like character. Ultimately, our Barry is fighting against his own 18-year-old Barry. But 18-year-old Barry, because he's influenced by our Barry, stay with me, he ends up saving our Barry and ultimately killing himself because older Barry tried to kill his younger self, and that stops whatever's happening there. I like during this montage scene that the older Barry is the original Barry from the original TV show, who also plays Barry's dad in the current TV show from 2014 with Grant Gustin. You see a little bit of a cameo when he was younger in it. We also get other cameos from other Batmans, other Supermans, Supergirls. We get Christopher Reeve, which was the big one. We also even get Nicolas Cage playing the Superman that he was supposed to play back in the late 90s and we never got, but we get to see him as well. So there's some really nice cameos in there. After young Barry sacrifices himself to save our Barry then realises that in order to save that world, to save that 18-year-old Barry, to save everyone, he has to go back and undo what he'd done, and that is to remove the tomatoes from the cart that his mum was pushing, which would ultimately lead to her death and everything would go back to normal. As sad as that is, he had to do it, and it was a very sad moment because I knew it was coming, but I've seen the TV show with Grant Gustin and I know that they had a similar storyline and a similar timeline. The fact that I had to see it again was quite hard. It wasn't as emotional as what we saw in the TV show, but it was still very emotional, and I think Ezra Miller played a really good part in this because he really portrayed that emotion on screen. If there was any shining light in anything that happened for this Barry, is that he understood what he had to do to save his dad. Throughout the film, his dad is trying to plead his innocence, and there was CCTV footage that showed his dad in a store at the time of the attack because he was the one that went to go to get the tomatoes, but he was never looking up because the tomatoes were down on the bottom shelf, so the CCTV footage was not enough. But our Barry decided, let's move the tomatoes to the top shelf so that the CCTV footage would show that his dad trying to get the tomatoes from the top shelf, thus proving his innocence. So when our Barry goes back to his own timeline, his mum is unfortunately still dead, but at least the CCTV footage is there to prove his dad's innocence. The only other surprise that we got in this new world that Barry comes back to is Bruce comes up to meet him, and it's not Ben Affleck's Bruce, it's George Clooney's Batman that's coming out of the car. So it just shows that this new multiverse is now broken. There is a post-credit scene with Aquaman, and that only really confirms that Aquaman is going to be continuing on in this multiverse. Obviously we've got an Aquaman 2 coming out as well, but there's nothing doing anything with the story with the post-credit scene. It just really confirms that Jason Momoa's Aquaman is still part of the DCEU. If we look at the CGI in The Flash, I think the CGI is probably some of the worst CGI I've seen in modern cinema. That superimposing of Barry's face next to the original Barry was very off-putting at times. Obviously it's still a good film, it's still Barry interacting with Barry, but they could have went about it a different way, maybe do a split screen or film each scene separately. But obviously I don't know what the budget was fully, but they should have done a little bit better with the CGI. If we look at the acting in the film, I think the acting was almost phenomenal by everyone. I just love seeing Michael Keaton back as Batman again. He gets a really good amount of screen time as well. And props to Ezra Miller for what he done in the film. He had to play two parts in the movie, and I think he played two parts perfectly. He played two parts of the same character, but they did feel different. Apart from the CGI, of course, it still felt like we had two different people playing these characters. That's how different he was. He was playing a young, naive, 18-year-old annoying character, but at the same time he was playing a kind of annoying 28-year-old character as well. So I think he played both parts perfectly. I genuinely thought that Ezra Miller was going to annoy me. He annoyed me a little bit in some of the other Justice League movies with The Flash. He seemed a little bit too much, but in this one he was too much, but he was intentionally too much to the point where I actually really enjoyed it, and I was surprised by the both parts that he played. Overall, guys, I think it was a very safe storyline to use, one that I really enjoyed, one that I would definitely watch time and time again, and at the same time it was also a good storyline to really reboot the DCEU without deleting anything that happened before. So if you've seen this movie, guys, what are your thoughts on it? Were you surprised by how good it was? Did you not like it? Why did you not like it? Leave your comments down below, let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.
To get you, Barbara.
Ever played in the cat?
Someone's in the back seat! Tell me where you are, John!
Wolfman's got a knife!